When I heard the guidance from the heavy or the junior drill instructor about having a study session at 0330, I really took him at his word. I thought it was a study session. I didn't realize that these were innuendos for a blanket party. And so when I got up for the study session and I saw what was going on, which was, basically folks beating up another guy, it just was counter to what I believe was supposed to be happening.
Did anything change for you after that night?
I began to doubt what the Marine Corps stood for. I began to doubt that this was what I wanted to do. I think a lot of the recruits in 3rd Squad, once we became privates, my belief that I could make a go of the Marine Corps and, in 4 years, I could get something out of it. But more importantly, I could represent what I believe the Marine Corps truly was meant to be. Yeah.
How has your family played a role in your career?
We have to really start with my dad. He had always aspired for us to be in the military somehow. One of my earliest memories of him was him teaching us how to hand salute. And then he also had some pictures of him with what appeared like a 240 Golf on top of the Connex box, which I later discovered was his particular volunteer action during the Tet Offensive. My mom influenced me in that she was very accommodating to whatever I wanted to choose. She would never say no or try to direct me either way. Yeah, between my cousin Troy, my brother Willie, my brother George with his military service, I saw that as a good stepping stone. I don't think my sister, I would have to say that I probably didn't give her a chance to discuss it, but I sort of intuitively knew she would be against it. I think she was against me moving away from Ohio back to California. But at that point, I was just ready to start a new life.
I remember when you went to your first school. Did that event change you in any way?
I express that as one of the things I learned about leadership in the Marine Corps. I just had to stand it and take it, right? Because at the time I just left boot camp. Officers were supposedly untouchable. You couldn't talk to an officer until you were told to talk. And then it came out that I was being accused of, popping the urinalysis for doing drugs. And I had to run in my chucks. And so I'm running, got it back, sweaty as all can be because it's Meridian, Mississippi in the summer. I'm like drenched, produced the bottle, went back to the patient center in attention. They threw the bottle at me and says, "Get out of here." Not even an apology. I once again had serious doubts about if the organization was what it was supposed to be. And I felt like the last thing I wanted to be as an officer, last thing I wanted to be is in the Marine Corps. And very, very despondent. But, I kind of remember now where Staff Sergeant Oberholzer, without really saying anything, just sort of, called to me in the hallway and just sort of gave me a squeeze on the shoulder. And, we're not known for intimate contact or affectionate contact. So that squeeze on the shoulder, I think was enough. And a couple weeks later, I got promoted to Lance Corporal. They said it was an administrative error, but I think it was the Staff Sergeant standing up for me, saying all the things that I was subjected to. I just stood tall.
東京までの飛行時間は1時間50分を予定しております。それでは到着までごゆっくりお過ごしください。
Marilao, you're going up north. And I'm thinking, oh God, because I heard north was Schwab. And I'm thinking, this is it. I just started complaining about it being bad, and now it's going to get worse. Because I heard they didn't even have a room in Foster. I'll be back in the Squab Bay, or Schwab. And so I asked the staff sergeant, well, where is that? He's like, well, you go out to Foster, you go library gate, and you turn right. I got a sea bag drag, and I did what the staff sergeant said, and I turned right up 58, headed towards Kadena, not knowing it was an Air Force base. I got to Kadena, and I realized Kadena was the Marine Wing Liaison Kadena. And the first thing I had to face was the charge of being UA, because everyone didn't know where I was. They were like, you were UA, you were supposed to be here over, 2 hours. And they were like, BS, nobody walks from Foster. And I was like, well, I did. And he said, what kind of idiot would walk from Foster? And I said, well, that's what the staff sergeant told me. He said, hang on a second. And I heard him yelling at the other staff sergeant. And then I heard him say something like, what the F do you expect the Lance Corporal to do if you tell him to walk up this 58, right? I was working under Marine Wing Liaison on Sabina, which was a bunch of Marines working on an Air Force base, living the life, right? So we lived in condemned barracks that the Air Force gave to the Navy, and then the Navy condemned them and they gave them to us. But for us, it had air conditioning. And so I was living the life of Riley on Sabina. My 1 year had turned into 2 years. I had managed to get married, convinced myself that I wanted to live on Okinawa for the rest of my days, and I wanted to do another extension with the intention of probably just getting out because I loved Okinawa that much. Well, my second IPCOT was denied, and I thought, what's the injustice of that? I wanted to stay Okinawa, but my staff NCO at the time said I needed to learn more about not only the Marine Corps, but life in general. And I didn't know enough to say that that's where I wanted to end up. And I don't remember that staff sergeant's name, but he had these horn-rimmed glasses, and he was an MWLK. And he absolutely was right, because I learned a lot more than I thought I ever would.
Okay, so you get to Norfolk. How did this duty station transform your life, your goals, and your next steps?
I met some great officers, like Captain Brady, who gave me the greatest advice of my life, which was, Frank, if you want to get smarter, if you want to be more intelligent, listen to NPR every day. So even today, I still remember that advice, and I listen to NPR every day. Keith Gilchrist, who's I think he's a retired lieutenant colonel now. But Kiki was a great influence. When you're in an island of dishonest folks that are just being overly misogynistic or racist, God sends you a friend. 2 young Marines singing the national anthem as loud as we were in the middle of the morning, in the middle of the evening, being the first one on deck and last one on deck, field Dan. Yeah, I think that reinforced my notion that good Marines still existed. I should not forget Sergeant Major Gooseby. He's the guy that picked me up when I was about to get out, and I was ready to hang it up, and I stopped spit shining my boots, and he caught me on the catwalk one day, telling me, "You look like SHIT, and what's going on with you?" And I was just disgruntled because I was stuck at corporal. I felt like I was a lot better than the other sergeants that were getting promoted. We just had a staff sergeant that was promoted after being basically popped for cocaine, and everyone knew he did cocaine. So I was disgruntled beyond belief. But Sergeant Major Gooseby picked me up, and he gave me that phrase: "The Marine Corps begins or ends with you." And he said every day that I came looking like SHIT-BAG, the Marine Corps was dying, and it was my responsibility to choose. Was it going to die on my watch, or was it not? And I wish I had more talks with Sergeant Major Gooseby, because he really picked me up from that. And I think there's a little video clip when right before we're going to the Gulf War, and Sergeant Major Gooseby said, "We're going to get ready, mix it up," as I'm walking around with my video camera like a nerd. Yeah, I'm so glad I caught him on that one. But yeah, Sergeant Major Gooseby, wherever you are, you were probably the most impactful to set my trajectory to land where I am.
Sergeant Major 774.
Sergeant Major 774. Ready to mix it up.
Ready to follow Sergeant Major into SOTI.
I think the most impactful thing, though, that I learned about my transition was when I was at the basic school, and Echo Company was there during the blizzard of '95, and my staff platoon commander had forgotten me. He put me in what we call a passive line position, which is where you have to stay in one position so that troops passing a particular location into enemy territory needed to be there because you marked the point. So he set me down in the prone position, put his hands on my shoulder, says, "Stay here. Whatever you do, don't move because we're going to be coming back with the entire company to pass right here, and you're marking the spot, and you will give us a warning if there's anything or anybody." So he put me in a spot. It's snowing like crazy, and it's hours. Hours are passing by, hours and hours and hours, and now it's dark. It's pitch black, and I'm covered in snow. Literally, I'm literally covered in snow, and I don't even remember the time, but I know it was way too long out in the snow. My hands and everything is beyond numb now. I'm starting to just get sleepy. And that was it. I was getting ready to just pass out. And I finally saw some Marines and I thought, this is my opportunity. And luckily I was able to squeeze off one blank round, and that's all I remember. And later, what turned out to be basically the police crew, they were cleaning up the brass and everything. A bunch of enlisted Marines said they found me buried in snow, mumbling something about "you're surrounded, give up," and they had taken me to medical. And I was literally what the corpsman said was on my deathbed because I was dying. And so they pumped me back up with fluids, and I made it back to the squad bay. Meanwhile, the rest of the Echo Company had been released for a long weekend. And there was my SPC, my staff platoon commander, sitting at his desk. And the minute he saw me, you could see that it registered in his mind that he had forgotten about me. I realized the guy that I was looking up to, this infantry god, was an idiot. And he had left me there to die. And all he could do was basically scramble, trying to figure out a way out of this so his career wasn't ruined. I let him have it. I was like, I was dying. You left me there. I thought it was some, effing test. I thought all officers, you have to go through this test. So I stayed there like an idiot because I thought somebody was waiting for me to move to see if I had what it took to be an officer. And I realized at that moment forward, officers have to take care of themselves because nobody takes care of an officer except themselves. And if I don't take care of myself, then the enlisted won't be taken care of. I said, look, Captain, I don't, give a SHIT about you, but I want to be an officer to take down my Marines. And from now on, if you tell me to do something, I'm going to question it. And I'm going to question everything you have to say because I'm going to survive this thing. Met my wife, Angie, and we stayed on Okinawa till probably the longest time any Marine has ever stayed in Okinawa.
That's right.
Yeah, 96 to 2004.
That's crazy, man. Okay, I have a question. How did you guys meet?
One can say it was love at first sight. There was a Star Wars cardboard cutout. And I'd asked her, I said, hey, excuse me, can I, put my name for that cardboard cutout? And so she was very kind. She was like, I don't know if it's available, but I'll put your name and I'll call you if it is. So I was like, oh, I got to give her my number. Yeah, right? Didn't think anything of it because she was, certainly somebody I thought was, extremely beautiful. No more worries. Everything is taken care of by Vanjie. Once Vanjie's on the scene, I got a partner that not only endures the hardships of the military, she embraces it. And it kind of reminded me of when I had this one student at University of Arizona. Man, he just had changed like 180 degrees. Everyone was like, this guy needs to get kicked out. He was talking back. He was insulting people. He was really, really the most difficult student. And everyone was telling me, this guy's changed. And he wasn't even a Marine officer. He was a sailor. But some of my colleagues had asked me to talk to him because they knew I had a good rapport with all the students. And so as I talked to him, this guy's just indignant, cussing at me. And I was like, what's going on with you? You have, straight A's. Everyone doesn't know what's going on with you. And he's like, I don't give a F, U, C, K. I don't know. You're not even my, officer instructor. I said, well, okay. I don't know what's going on with you, but we're taking a walk down to medical. Because I just wanted to assume that there was something wrong with this kid. Took him down to medical, just said, hey, this guy's going 100%. I'm no doctor, but can you take a look at him? Long story short, that started a fairly quick process to determine he had a rare liver disease or some kind of disease of which he had a toxin which created this whole mental imbalance. And even a longer story short, he came back about a year later. His parents came up to the office to thank me because he was back in the program and they determined it was a medical and he was successful. So when I start checking in, the guy tells me, they said, don't even unpack because you're going forward to Iraq. And I was like, well, I just got this. Like, that's what I'm telling you, don't unpack. He's like, leave your family where they are, where you can delay your PCS, blah, blah, blah. So he gave me all those instructions. And I got put in charge of the multinational corps, Iraq Coalition Intel Support Element. In my podcast, I call it the Dirty Dozen. These guys were awesome. They were just like, you know, the lieutenant colonel that was a senior officer was Bulgarian, smoking a cigar. He didn't have his shirt on when I met him. Big old bulbous belly, hairy guy, mustache and face. And he had this like thick accent. I can't really do it, but he was like, welcome. You are the new commander of our group. I reminded him he was in charge because I was only a major. And under great protest, he didn't want to be in charge. He said, Americans have always been in charge. I was like, no, sir, that's not how it works. You're Lieutenant Colonel. I'm a major. I'm your assistant. He's like, Frank, what is our mission? What are we supposed to do? And he's asking me all these questions now, and he's putting tasks at me. He's like, I need computers, I need this and that. And I'm like, yes, sir, all this stuff. And then like, what's our mission? And I was like, hang on, I need to find out a mission for you because I don't know why you're here. And then I turned us into Open Source Intel Center because there's no better human officers in the former Soviet Union, KGB guys. And
So, like you said, you did a quick turnaround. Now you're in Afghanistan. What are two differences between your deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan?
the more obvious one is that I'm not in charge. Bleeding Marja comes to mind. So the operations of which we were supporting, General Mills was trying to convince the national capital authorities that we needed to stay within Sangin and Kajiki, which for my planning team, we had to demonstrate how the particular operations down in Marja, which was further south, was significantly supported by Marja, or excuse me, by Sangin and Kajiki. And if we could prove that, we wouldn't have to bend to the national capital region's demands and put more forces into Marja. General Mills, to his credit, listened to Colonel Hansen, and Colonel Hansen took the SWAC products and some of our plans products over to the White House and showed the president that, we had to stay engaged in Sangin and Kajiki. Very proud of that particular contribution to the war because General Mills made a promise to the Alakozai tribe leaders that we wouldn't abandon them like the NATO forces had abandoned them years before. And I remember General Mills, during one of the key leader engagements, actually telling the Alakozai that, he can't promise that the United States would not abandon them, but he promised them that General Mills and the Marines during his time would not abandon them.
You leave Afghanistan, you come back to California for like little tiny bit, and then you head to Virginia.
That was a surprise. The monitor and I had a conversation. You were already on the West Coast? I said, yeah, but I was deployed all of that time. You can teach at Nimitzi at Jamnack, Virginia. It'll be a good career move. I love that idea. It's like, yeah, I would love to be a TCO the Navy Marine Corps Intel Training Center. What both of us couldn't foresee is that some chief of staff, seeing my orders coming to Nimitzi, redirected me to the Joint Staff at Suffolk, Virginia. Had some great experiences at the Joint Staff. I think 28 exercises with different groups, everything from Germany to Uganda.
How was Uganda?
It was incredible. So the East African Standby Force, one of my favorite stories is I'm about to brief the East African Standby Force, and I've already done my research, and I've gotten to know some of the folks there through interaction on emails and whatnot. So I'm preceded by this really out of Africa, white, pudgy kind of CIA operative. When I say out of Africa, he's wearing linen suit with a white, safari-like hat, fedora, whatever. And he's just briefing the East African Standby Force with this elongated, very elaborate English, as you can see, the Eastern, and he's just like, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, but he gets through it and he's sweating and he's got this cloth, he's damp, he's swabbing his forehead from, because it's hot. And he gets done and he comes to me because he's noticed I'm the next briefer. He looks at me and he says, good luck, my man, good luck with these people. And he walks away. And I get up there and my buddies that I made friends with are like, Frank, what's wrong with that guy? And I was like, oh, he doesn't know that English is the Uganda national language. And so my folks were just busted up because he had just made a complete idiot of himself, and more importantly, an idiot of the CIA. The folks were like, he's from the CIA, and he didn't know English is our national language. And then when he said goodbye in Swahili, which was, of course, detested because of Idi Amin. And so all the things I didn't know until my friends told me, because I got to know them before I started briefing. So, yeah, that trip was extremely enlightening for a couple of reasons. I didn't realize that the mouth of the Nile was there in that town we were in Uganda. I didn't know how lush the continent of Africa could be. I didn't appreciate that, when I learned that English was the national language of Uganda, how close we were in very similar ways. But what I did find very disturbing was, Al-Shabaab was in full glory, and they had captured those schoolgirls, and they were, basically producing, fact of combatants. So it was very disheartening because I knew that, we would be there for a short time, and, much like my Afghan or Iraqi experience, it was like, hey, great to know you, good luck, see you later, or not.
So now we're in 29 Palms. You're the NCCS director, right?
I'm supposed to be XO at McTogg, so that would have been a great career move. I'm supposed to be an XO, recovery from the Joint Staff, because the Joint Staff was not going to be a good career move. And once again, some well-intentioned chief of staff redirected me to be the MCC director for what he said was only going to be a 6-month gig. But that 6 months turned into 2 years. I think one of my more memorable times at MCCS was fighting for the Buck Cherry Band to play in 29 Palms, because Buck Cherry was a very controversial band. One of my first promises to the Marines when I would go on walkabouts and I would talk to Marines, go to the barracks. So they wanted Buck Cherry to play. And that caused a big fissure. The chaplain was against it because there was a song that they played that sounded misogynistic, but it was a parody, and it was just typical rock and roll against the institution, right? So there was a lot of movement to prevent me from doing it. And I remember the staff meeting very clearly when General Caparata heard the chaplain's plea to not allow Frank to bring this, hedonistic band into 29 Palms, and everyone else concurred that it was a bad move because it would create riots and mayhem and on base. And so General Caparata looked at me like, Frank, you've been running this organization for a year now. Do I have your promise that nothing will happen? I said, yes, sir. I can promise you that, because I got a pretty good team and I got the Marines behind me. And so we did it. And a time when I was in the green room with Buck Cherry, and I had mentioned, hey, Buck Cherry guys, and they were all really cool guys. They were talking about family. They were like middle-aged men, and they're like, oh, Frank, yeah, we thought about that lyric not going over well with the community. So they totally changed the lyrics, and they put a guitar riff instead of that. I was in my chucks. I made the announcement. Everyone behaved themselves. I was in the mosh pit, bumping and grinding with a lot of folks. It was fun. And we didn't have a single event, not a single event. And General Cropper, I remember at the staff meeting, made mention of that. He's like, I think Frank kept his word. There wasn't a single event at Buck Cherry. The next event was Tracy Austin. Tracy Austin is a country singer. Everybody knew Tracy Austin. They wanted to be in charge of it. And so they took me off of it. And the chief of staff said, I got this one, Frank. You had the last concert, so I don't want to burden you. But they just wanted to be elbowing, rubbing with Tracy Austin. Nobody protested that one. And then after that concert, there were multiple injuries because people were throwing beer bottles. They had to have PMO come in and break in the country fights. And so not a single thing from the chaplain or the protest. I always found that very ironic. And General Cropperado was really kind. You know, I think at the last step he knew that happened. He was like, so I hear Frank wasn't in charge of the Tracy Austin concert, and not a single thing was said. And he's like, okay, enough about that.
So let's get to Hawaii.
Oh, Mark Warpath. We saw it as a new sort of start. I think Banji was feeling the burn of being alone in California. Hawaii was going to be a new start. We had our 3 grandkids that we had custody of. Still had my daughter Down syndrome, and we really had a great time there. The organization was solid. You know, Colonel Andy Drake, just a great American hero. Steve Manning, just an incredible character that is a national treasure. I worked with at the time, I think Gunner Sharm Falco, who turned to Master Sharm Falco when I worked at the Pentagon. There was many people, I wish I could remember all their names, like Master Randy Simpson. You know, I can see all their faces, and I apologize for not remembering right now on the spot. But that's kind of why I'm hoping to put a wiki on my podcast, so that people might just call me out like, hey, dude, what about me? And I really want to, expound on my experiences with everyone there.
You're headed back to Okinawa
to assume the duties of the G2, which was being the leader of 65 Intel Marines, was really exciting and very rewarding.
COVID-19 hits. What goes through your mind as a Marine, as a father, as a husband?
Probably one of my more embarrassing estimates is when, I don't remember the chief of staff's name, but he said, hey, Frank, what about this COVID thing? Is it going to be a big deal? And I had been reading all the intel reports. The Chinese were basically grabbing people off the street, and they looked like they had it on lockdown. So I said, well, sir, it looks like the Chinese have had the COVID thing locked down, and so it should be a matter of time before the Chinese eradicate it. So that was probably the worst intel estimate I ever had.
In 2021, you come to the East Coast again. You're at the Pentagon.
And so I was the G1 section lead. So for a year and a half, I learned a lot about geographical intelligence. I think the greatest contribution I had there was just reminding a lot of folks, like the aviation department, that understanding the format and the particular data that G1 can provide to the aircraft really needed to be paid attention to. Because my favorite saying was that the Marine Corps was driving a bunch of high-powered, muscle cars with 8-track players, and the music industry had moved on into streaming. And so I think that resonated well, and I got a couple of key events aligned so that the conversation was being had, and I do believe we're finally recognizing that this incongruity it was having an operational impact.
And here we are, 2023. What's different about you from 1985?
I think there's a great amount of relief in terms of the trajectory of which I still am pursuing. Like when you're young, you worry about the trajectory of whether or not you're making some key decisions that are going to affect you the rest of your life, and whether or not you are making the right decisions. Now, because I'm so far down that timeline, I don't worry about the trajectory as much. I've accepted another position for a career, not as something that's going to set me in a trajectory, something that is just going to pay the bills and be a means to an end, so that I may continue to keep the Bank of Frank open for other people's particular quality of life. I think I'm okay in the trajectory of which I found myself. And so I may not be looking at myself more about where am I headed, as more of where I've been and how I can use those things I've been to help those that are trying to find a trajectory. I feel like perhaps now it's my role to be an anchor for other people on their climb. I'm not ambitious. I'm not trying to pursue anything more. One might say I didn't even accomplish things I was pursuing because I just sort of let inertia take me, but I'm satisfied in that it took me far enough to where it might be beneficial to others. And so that young man in 1985 had no idea what he was getting into. He just really believed that starting something would be enough. And then if he just kept at it, he'd discover what his purpose was.